Sarah Whitmore stood at the kitchen window of the old farmhouse, watching her brother's BMW pull into the gravel driveway. Behind it came her sister's Mercedes. Both cars looked absurdly out of place next to the rusted pickup truck that had been their father's, the one Sarah still drove because she couldn't afford to replace it. She checked her watch. 2:47 p.m. They were early. Probably eager to keep up appearances. To play the part of loving siblings gathering for Thanksgiving at the family farm. The family farm that they'd been systematically stealing from her for 3 years. Sarah took a deep breath and smoothed down her sweater. Plain, worn at the elbows, nothing like the designer clothes her siblings would be wearing. She looked tired because she was tired. Tired from working the farm alone. Tired from watching the accounts drain. Tired from knowing her brother and sister were robbing her blind while pretending to help. But today, that ended. Today, she had proof. And she had a forensic accountant sitting in her dining room, ready to explain exactly what Michael and Jennifer had been doing with their inheritance. "They're here," Sarah called into the dining room. A woman in her 50s looked up from the documents spread across the table. Catherine Wells, CPA, forensic accountant, and the person who'd spent the last 6 months untangling the web of fraud that Michael and Jennifer had woven around the Whitmore family farm. "Ready?" Catherine asked, her voice calm and professional. "As I'll ever be." Sarah heard car doors slamming, voices in the driveway, Michael's laugh. That easy, confident sound of someone who thought he'd gotten away with something. Jennifer's higher voice, probably complaining about the gravel or the cold or something else that made their childhood home seem beneath her now. Sarah opened the front door before they could knock. "Sarah!" Jennifer swept in first, arms outstretched for a hug that Sarah accepted stiffly. "Happy Thanksgiving! God, it's freezing out there. Don't you have the heat on?" "Heat costs money," Sarah said flatly. Jennifer laughed like Sarah had made a joke. "Well, maybe if you manage the farm better." "Oh, I'm kidding. Don't be so serious." Michael followed, carrying an expensive bottle of wine that probably cost more than Sarah's grocery budget for the month. "Hey, sis. Place looks the same." Translation: run down, neglected, not living up to the pristine image he preferred. "Yeah, well, money's been tight," Sarah said, watching their faces carefully. Neither of them showed even a flicker of guilt. "You know how it is." "That's why we're here to help," Michael said, clapping her on the shoulder with false camaraderie. "Family sticks together, right?" Sarah nearly laughed. "Family. Right." They moved into the living room, and that's when they noticed Catherine sitting in the dining room, visible through the archway, with papers spread across the table. "Oh," Jennifer said, her smile faltering slightly. "I didn't realize we'd have company." "This is Catherine Wells," Sarah said. "She's joining us for Thanksgiving." "How nice," Michael said, but his eyes had gone sharp, calculating. "And how do you two know each other?" "Catherine's a forensic accountant," Sarah said, her voice pleasant and light. "I hired her 6 months ago to review the farm's finances. She's been helping me understand where all the money's been going." The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Jennifer's smile became fixed, plastic. "I'm sorry, what?" "The money," Sarah repeated, "from the farm, from Dad's estate, from the equipment sales and the crop revenue. Catherine's been tracking it, all of it." Michael set down the wine bottle with a thud. "Sarah, what the hell is this?" "This," Sarah said calmly, "is Thanksgiving dinner. I thought we should have everything out in the open before we sit down to eat. Be grateful for what we have. Acknowledge what we've lost." She walked into the dining room and gestured to the papers spread across the table. Bank statements, ledgers, property records, canceled checks, transfer receipts. 3 years of financial documentation that told a very clear story. "Catherine, would you like to explain what you found?" 3 years earlier, their father had died. William Whitmore had been a farmer his entire life, working the 200 acres his own father had left him, raising corn and soybeans, keeping a small herd of cattle. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a good life, an honest living. He'd left the farm to all 3 of his children equally, Sarah, Michael, and Jennifer, 1/3 shares each. But, with a caveat, Sarah, who'd always loved the farm and had been working it alongside him for years, would manage the operations. Michael and Jennifer, who'd both moved to the city and built careers elsewhere, would be silent partners, sharing in the profits, but not involved in the day-to-day decisions. It had seemed fair. Sarah got to keep doing what she loved. Michael and Jennifer got their inheritance without having to work the land. What Sarah hadn't anticipated was that her siblings had no intention of being silent partners. Within 6 months of their father's death, Michael had suggested improvements to the farm's financial structure. He worked in finance. Surely he knew better than Sarah how to manage the books. Why didn't she let him set up some better accounting systems? Open some new accounts to maximize their returns? Sarah, grieving and overwhelmed with suddenly managing the farm alone, had agreed. Jennifer had volunteered to help with equipment purchases. She had connections, she said. She could get them better deals than what Sarah could negotiate on her own. Why didn't Sarah just let Jennifer handle those transactions? Again, Sarah had agreed, grateful for the help. What she hadn't realized, what she'd been too trusting and too exhausted to see, was that Michael and Jennifer had been setting up a scheme to systematically drain the farm's resources while making it look like Sarah was mismanaging everything. Michael had opened accounts in the farm's name, but with himself as the primary signatory. Profits that should have been distributed equally were being diverted to accounts only he could access. Jennifer had been purchasing equipment, but at inflated prices from companies she had connections to, pocketing kickbacks on every transaction. Then she'd been selling that same equipment as used and keeping the proceeds. Together, they'd been bleeding the farm dry while telling Sarah she just needed to work harder and manage better. And Sarah, exhausted and isolated, had believed she was failing. Until she'd run into Catherine Wells at the feed store 6 months ago. Catherine was explaining the findings now, her voice steady and professional as she walked through the documentation. "Let's start with the accounts," Catherine said, pulling out a spreadsheet. "When your father died, the farm had approximately $340,000 in liquid assets, plus the land value and equipment. According to the terms of the will, profits from operations should have been split 3 ways, after operating expenses." She looked at Michael and Jennifer, who were both standing very still. Over the past 3 years, the farm has generated approximately $480,000 in revenue from crop sales, equipment sales, and cattle. Operating expenses, seeds, feed, fuel, maintenance, property taxes total approximately $260,000. That should leave $220,000 in profit, split 3 ways. Each of you should have received approximately $73,000 over 3 years. Catherine pulled out another document. Sarah has received $43,000 total, barely enough to cover her personal living expenses, and significantly less than her share. "Where did the rest go?" Sarah asked, even though she already knew. Catherine pulled out bank statements, credit card receipts, transfer records. Michael opened an account called Whitmore Farm Holdings LLC 6 months after your father's death. This account has received deposits totaling $178,000, money that came from crop sales, equipment liquidation, and the original estate funds. Michael is the sole owner of this LLC. Michael's face had gone pale. That account was for farm improvements. "Was it?" Catherine interrupted. "Because according to these records, the expenditures from that account include $45,000 for a boat, $32,000 for a timeshare in Colorado, $18,000 for home renovations, at your house, Michael, not the farm, $12,000 in restaurant charges, $8,000 at a golf resort. Shall I continue?" Silence. Catherine turned to Jennifer. "And then we have the equipment situation. Jennifer, you purchased a new tractor for the farm 18 months ago for $85,000, correct?" Jennifer's jaw was tight. Yes, Sarah needed it. Except the market value of that tractor was $62,000. You paid $23,000 over market rate. And according to these invoices, you received a finder's fee of $18,000 from the dealer. A dealer, I should mention, that's owned by your husband's cousin. Jennifer's face flushed red. Then, 6 months later, you sold that same tractor as used equipment the farm no longer needed for $58,000. The money went into an account in your name. Sarah never saw a cent of it. Catherine laid out more documents, each one a transaction, a transfer, a theft, disguised as farm management. In total, Catherine said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, Michael has taken approximately $178,000 that should have been split 3 ways or reinvested in the farm. Jennifer has taken approximately $94,000 through inflated purchases and equipment resales. Together, you've stolen roughly $272,000 from your sister and the family business over 3 years. She looked at both of them. That's fraud, that's embezzlement, and it's more than enough to press criminal charges. The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah watched her siblings' faces. Michael's had gone from pale to gray. Jennifer's from red to white. They looked at each other, some wordless communication passing between them. Then Michael tried to salvage it. Sarah, this is a misunderstanding. Those accounts, I was managing investments for the farm's future. Investments, Sarah said, her voice flat. Is that what we're calling your boat? You don't understand complex financial. I understand theft, Sarah interrupted. I understand that while I've been working 70-hour weeks trying to keep this farm running, trying to figure out why we never had any money, despite decent harvests, you've been buying timeshares and boats with my inheritance. Our inheritance, Michael corrected, then immediately realized his mistake. Exactly, Sarah said. Our inheritance, which means 1/3 of everything belonged to me. But I've been living on poverty wages while you've been living like you won the lottery. She turned to Jennifer. And you, telling me I needed that expensive tractor, that you were helping me get a good deal, when you were actually scamming me out of thousands of dollars. I didn't scam, Jennifer started. You bought equipment at inflated prices, took kickbacks, then sold the equipment and kept the money, Catherine said. That's the definition of a scam. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. Whether from guilt or from being caught, Sarah couldn't tell. Sarah, I'm sorry. I know it looks bad, but we were going to pay you back. When? Sarah's voice cracked. When was I going to see that money? After the farm went under? After I lost Dad's land because I couldn't afford the property taxes? After I had to sell everything because YouTube bled it dry? It wasn't supposed to be like this, Michael said, and for the first time he sounded less sure of himself. The farm was struggling anyway. We thought. You thought you'd take what you wanted before there was nothing left, Sarah finished. You didn't care that this place was my home, that it was Dad's legacy. You just saw dollar signs and decided to help yourselves. That's not fair. Fair? Sarah's voice rose. You want to talk about fair? I've been working this farm alone for 3 years. Alone? While you've been spending money that should have kept this place running. Do you know how many nights I've stayed up trying to figure out how to make the mortgage payment? How to afford seed for planting? How to fix equipment with no budget? She gestured around the old farmhouse, the peeling wallpaper, the worn furniture, the draft coming through windows that needed replacing. You think I like living like this? You think I chose to barely scrape by while you two bought boats and went on vacations? Michael and Jennifer said nothing. I trusted you, Sarah said, and her voice finally broke. You're my family. When Dad died, I thought we'd work together. I thought we'd honor what he built. Instead, you stole from me. You lied to me. You let me think I was failing when you were the one sabotaging everything. Sarah, Jennifer reached out. Sarah stepped back. Don't pretend you care now that you're caught. She took a breath, steadying herself. Here's what's going to happen. You have 2 choices. She pulled out a document from the pile on the table, something Catherine had prepared in advance. Choice 1. You sign this agreement. You return every cent you stole with interest. Michael, you liquidate your LLC and return the $178,000 plus 7% interest, which brings it to about $191,000. Jennifer, you return your $94,000 plus interest, about $101,000. All of it goes back into the farm's operating account. We don't have that kind of liquid cash, Michael started. Then sell your boat, Sarah said coldly. Sell your timeshare, take out loans. I don't care how you get it, but you have 90 days to return what you stole, or we move to choice 2. Which is? Jennifer asked, her voice small. I press criminal charges, embezzlement, fraud, whatever else Catherine and my lawyer can make stick. Sarah's voice was steel. You'll face prosecution, probably jail time, definitely criminal records that will destroy your careers, and I'll sue you in civil court for everything you took, plus damages, plus legal fees. Michael's face had gone from gray to ashen. His finance career would be over with a criminal record. Jennifer looked like she might be sick. You can't, Michael tried. I absolutely can, Sarah said. I have 3 years of documentation, Catherine's forensic analysis, bank records, email trails where you both discussed how to maximize our returns and manage Sarah's expectations. It's all here, and it's all admissible in court. She looked at both of them. So you choose, pay back what you stole and we end this privately, or I make sure everyone knows exactly what you did. Your employers, your friends, your neighbors, everyone. The silence stretched out. Sarah could hear the old clock in the hallway ticking, marking seconds that felt like hours. Finally, Michael spoke. And if we pay it back, then what? Then you sign away your ownership stake in the farm, Sarah said. You forfeit your inheritance. The farm becomes mine, completely. You walk away with nothing more than what you already stole and got to keep for a few years. That's not fair, Jennifer started. Fair? Sarah's laugh was bitter. You stole nearly $300,000 from me and you want to talk about fair? You're lucky I'm giving you the option to avoid prison. She pulled out another document, transfer paperwork that would sign over Michael and Jennifer's shares of the farm to Sarah in exchange for settling the matter privately. You have until the end of Thanksgiving dinner to decide, Sarah said. We can sit down and eat like a family, pretend everything's normal for a few hours. Or you can leave now and wait for the police to show up on Monday with arrest warrants. Your choice. They sat down to dinner. It was the most uncomfortable meal Sarah had ever experienced, and that included the Thanksgiving, right after their mother had left, 20 years ago. The turkey was dry. Sarah had been too stressed to cook it properly. The mashed potatoes were lumpy. The green beans were from a can. Everything about the meal was a far cry from the abundant, joyful Thanksgivings their father used to host. But Sarah served it with her head high because this was her table now, her farm, her home that she'd fought to keep while her siblings had tried to steal it out from under her. Catherine ate quietly, professionally, occasionally glancing at the siblings with the detached interest of someone who'd seen this scenario play out before. She'd told Sarah during their preparation that family fraud cases were depressingly common. Siblings stealing from siblings, children robbing elderly parents, relatives draining estates. It was always the same, greed masquerading as help. Michael pushed food around his plate, not eating. Jennifer dabbed at her eyes periodically with her napkin, leaving mascara smudges. Sarah ate mechanically, tasting nothing, just going through the motions of a Thanksgiving dinner that was really a reckoning. When the meal was finally over, Michael cleared his throat. We'll sign the documents, he said, his voice hollow. Both of them. The repayment agreement and the ownership transfer. Sarah nodded, pulling out the paperwork she'd had ready. Catherine brought a notary seal. We can make it official right now. Jennifer's hand shook as she signed her name, tears dropping onto the paper. Sarah, I really am sorry. Don't, Sarah said. Just sign. Michael signed with tight, angry strokes, his jaw clenched. When he finished, he looked at Sarah with something like hatred. You're really going to take everything. You already took everything from me, Sarah said. I'm just taking back what's mine. Catherine notarized the documents, her seal making them legally binding. Sarah filed them carefully into a folder, along with copies for her lawyer. It was done. Michael and Jennifer were no longer owners of the Whitmore family farm. They had 90 days to return the money they'd stolen, with interest. And if they defaulted, Sarah would pursue criminal charges without hesitation. I think we should go, Michael said, standing abruptly. Yes, I think you should, Sarah agreed. Jennifer stood too, looking around the old farmhouse like she was seeing it for the first time, or the last time. This was our home too, you know. We have memories here. Then you should have honored them, Sarah said quietly, instead of trying to profit from them. They left without another word, their expensive cars kicking up gravel as they drove away. Catherine packed up her documents, giving Sarah a small smile. You did well. That took courage. I didn't have a choice, Sarah said. It was this or lose everything. You always have a choice. You chose to fight. A lot of people in your situation just let it happen. Catherine handed Sarah her card. Call me if they don't pay, or if you need anything else. I meant what I said. I'll testify in court if it comes to that. Thank you, Sarah said and meant it, for everything, for finding the truth. The numbers don't lie, Catherine said. They never do. That's why people like your siblings are always so surprised when they get caught. They think they're clever enough to hide it, but money leaves a trail. After Catherine left, Sarah stood alone in the farmhouse. It was quiet, cold, still in need of repairs she couldn't quite afford yet. But it was hers. All hers. She walked outside across the yard to the barn where her father's old tools still hung on the wall. She could almost hear his voice. The land doesn't lie, Sarah. You put in the work, you'll get the harvest. Might not always be easy, but it'll be honest. He'd been talking about farming, but it applied to this too. Sarah had put in the work, documenting, investigating, gathering proof. And now she was getting her harvest, justice, ownership, the farm's future secured. It wasn't the Thanksgiving she'd imagined 3 years ago, when they'd all gathered here right after Dad's funeral and promised to work together, to honor his memory, to keep the farm going as a family. But it was the Thanksgiving she'd needed. 90 days later, Sarah received 2 wire transfers. Michael's payment, $191,000, exactly what he owed to the penny. Jennifer's payment, $101,000. Also exact. No note, no apology, just the money, transferred in cold silence. Sarah deposited both checks into the farm's operating account and watched the balance climb to numbers she hadn't seen in 3 years. Numbers that meant she could finally fix the barn roof, replace the tractor Jennifer had sold out from under her, buy quality seed for spring planting, maybe even fix the heat in the farmhouse. She called Catherine with the update. I'm not surprised, Catherine said. Criminal prosecution would have destroyed them both professionally. This was the cheaper option, even if it hurt. Do you think they learned anything? Sarah asked. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Honestly, probably not. People like that usually just learn to be more careful next time. But the important thing is, they can't hurt you anymore. You got your farm back, you got your inheritance, that's the win. Sarah supposed that was true. She didn't hear from Michael or Jennifer after the payments, no apology, no explanation, no attempt to rebuild the relationship. Just silence. Which was fine. Sarah had the farm, she had her father's legacy, she had a future she could actually plan for now, without worrying about her accounts being drained. Spring came, and Sarah planted corn and soybeans in fields that were finally, completely, unquestionably hers. She worked from dawn to dusk, the same as always, but this time without the crushing weight of invisible theft draining every dollar she earned. The crops grew tall and healthy, the cattle thrived, the harvest in the fall was abundant. Sarah stood in the field one evening in October, looking at the rows of corn ready to be harvested, and thought about that Thanksgiving a year ago, the burnt turkey, the uncomfortable meal, the moment her siblings had realized they'd been caught. It hadn't been a traditional Thanksgiving. There'd been no gratitude shared, no family warmth, no joy. But there had been justice. And for Sarah, that was harvest enough. The following Thanksgiving, Sarah had the farmhouse to herself. She made a small meal, just enough for one, and ate it at the kitchen table with her father's old photo on the windowsill. She toasted him with cheap wine and told him about the year, about the good harvest, about the repairs she'd finally been able to make. I kept the farm, Dad, she said to the photo. It wasn't easy, and I lost Michael and Jennifer in the process, but I kept the land. She thought her father would have understood, would have been sad about losing his other children, but proud that Sarah had fought for what was right. The farm was hers now, not theirs, not the family's, hers. And she'd earned it, not through inheritance or luck, but through work and courage, and refusing to let greedy siblings steal her father's legacy. As she cleaned up from her solitary meal, she thought about Catherine's words. The numbers don't lie. They didn't. And neither did the harvest. Sarah had planted truth at Thanksgiving dinner a year ago. She'd cultivated it through documentation and legal proceedings. She'd watered it with determination and protected it with boundaries. And now she was reaping what she'd sown, a farm that was whole, a future that was secure, and the knowledge that she'd stood up for herself when it mattered most. Some harvests came from the soil. Others came from refusing to let lies take root. Sarah had cultivated both. And both had proven worth fighting for.